Hey, tattooed biker. I live in a very rural town in Mississippi, where the majority of everything is either forests or farms. My home happens to be very deep in a woodland area. It's almost like something out of a horror movie. The old creepy old house in the middle of the woods? Well, yeah, that's my place. Back when I first moved here, everything was normal. It was a quiet, peaceful house in the woods. The closest neighbor being 10 minutes or so down the road. Nothing at all out of the ordinary or weird, until one night. It happened while I was driving home from work. It was nearly midnight, so it was nearly pitch black out. I was tired of driving and ready to finally get home and get some sleep. Just as I let out a hearty yawn, closing my eyes for just a split second, that was all it took for me to almost hit something. There, not even 10 feet in front of me, sat this hairless, man-dog-looking creature. The whole thing was bloody and pale, hovering over the mutilated corpse of some animal. At least I hope it was an animal. The thing slowly looked up at me, staring me directly in the face with its beady, neon green eyes, shining due to my headlights reflecting off of them. Its jaw looked almost unhinged, hanging open, showing its many blood-covered teeth. I just sat there, frozen in fear. What was that thing? I laid on my horn trying to scare it off, but this thing didn't budge. It just sat there. After what felt like a 30-minute staring contest, although, to be honest, it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes, the thing quickly scurried away, walking off on all fours. I watched it as it disappeared into the thick mass of trees that matched the rest of the forest. My eyes shifted back and forth from the forest to the carcass. I rubbed my eyes before continuing on my drive. I still had a few minutes to my house, so I tried not to worry about that thing appearing in my yard. No, I haven't seen it plainly in front of me since. This happened about 8 months ago. But I constantly feel now like I'm being watched or followed. I did my own research. Apparently this thing is called a rake. Anyway, I believe it's taken a liking to me, which honestly scares me shitless. I'm constantly seeing it from a distance or out of the corner of my eye. Sometimes I see it for a few seconds at a time before it disappears into the woods again. I know this thing watches me when I sleep. I had set up a camera, waiting for the unfortunate day where I would wake up and see it. But I'm afraid that'll be the day that it finally strikes. Thanks for reading, signed, Brent. Dear Biker, this happened in 2018, while my boyfriend at the time, myself and a friend, were walking around near the river in our town. We live in a small town in Florida, right on the St. Johns River. So unless you're into fishing, there's really not much to do. It was getting pretty late, around 10 p.m., when we decided to go check out this abandoned furniture factory a few streets over. When we got there, we checked the doors in the front to see if they were unlocked by chance. They were, of course, locked, but we walked to the side of it, where it had been partially demolished a few years prior. The lower part of the walls there that had been standing, making a fence-like barrier that we'd have to climb over. I leaned over the wall to see if we'd be able to walk through there, but there was far too much rubble and weeds in the way. So we decided to leave and just head back to our cars. I was halfway to the sidewalk when from the weed-filled area came a deep, growly hello. I stopped and turned around, looking behind me as I felt the color drain from my face. There, as I watched, I could see the weeds move. That's when I just ran, leaving my boyfriend and my friend. When they saw me heading out, they ran too, and we ran almost 2 blocks before we stopped and started walking through the neighborhoods back to the cars. But the entire way back, we heard something climbing across rooftops. Rocks were flung at us from the tops of trees, and then we saw a pale figure quickly run past us. During the entire experience, I was flooded with a strong sense of dread. We finally got back to our cars safely, but we stood there for a few minutes, just trying to calm down before we drove. It was all calm for a minute before we heard the creature climb up onto the roof of a converted bank. It was there, pacing back and forth, just out of the reach of the light, throwing things at us and into a tree a few times. It was so scary being followed like that, through an area that I used to feel so safe in. I did some research when I got home, and the growl, the paleness, and the speed at which it ran matched the description I found in rake encounters. I think it only followed us and threw things because there were 3 of us there, staying close together. I just hope I never encounter it again, at least not alone. Signed, Amber. Dear Biker, I've always been intrigued by creepy stories and their power to embed themselves into a local community. Growing up in the 1980s, I was obsessed with tales concerning local boogeymen, and one such yarn which often spooked me was known as the Leaf Man. Such a monster was said to haunt an undisclosed section of woodland not far from Hailsham, although reports of the creature seem mostly vague. However, one eyewitness told me a few years ago the following story. Quote, I had been with 3 friends at the time. This must have been around 1984, during a time when it was normal for us kids to be out playing in the woods, as long as we were home by dark. I think at the time we were playing not far from what people know as Folkton Wood. It was around dusk, and we were all lighting a campfire when suddenly, from the shadows and, like in all good horror films, we heard the snap of a twig. We all sensed that we were being watched, but as teenagers, we were brazen and goaded what was lurking in the bushes to come out and fight. We all armed ourselves with, sticks and stones, only to have our eyes met by a horrifying sight. There, out of the shadows, came a tall, spindly figure that seemed to be covered in hair, which in turn was matted with leaves. This creature gave off a horrid stench, and through its tangled hair we could see its 2 burning eyes. As I'm sure you can imagine, we were all terrified, and so we fled, never once looking behind us to see if the monster was in pursuit. Of course, no one believed our story, but as we got older, most of us, except one, remained friends, and we often spoke about the creature named the Leaf Man. People often ask if we were the victims of a hoax. Memories can be hazy, but this thing seemed very real, and much more than just a man in a suit. End quote. Oddly, I have another report of a so-called Leaf Man, but from Kent, and again it involved a group of youths playing in an area and encountering such a manifestation. Some believe, however, that the creature was, in fact, a ghost of a soldier adorned in camouflage. Another creepy story from Sussex comes from Gatwick Airport, of all places, where it was once spoken of by local children that a horrible monster once lived. Of course, an airport is the last place that you'd expect any bloodthirsty beast, but anyway, the creature, sometimes believed to have been a descendant of the ancient dragon once said to haunt St. Leonard's Forest, was said to feed off scraps around the area, making its way through a network of the sewer systems, drainage pipes, and the likes between the villages. Of course, local children probably created the tale, but were equally frightened by it, to the point that eventually it was claimed that the salivating serpent was eager for human flesh as well. It's been suggested that some children around Crawley are reluctant to go to school in case they get plucked from the path by this monster, while other children walk home in groups, all collectively fearful that this elusive dragon may dine on their bones. It is possible, of course, that many of these legends may have stemmed from actual sightings of something that throughout history may have escaped or been released. But how can we explain the dreaded appearance of the Leaf Man? Thanks for reading. Signed, Harold. Dear Biker, back in 2010, I was participating in a field training exercise with the U.S. Marine Corps in an undisclosed location. I was about 3 days into the OP, and I became separated from my squad in a wooded environment. I was maybe 10 minutes into cleaning my rifle while sitting on a tree stump when I heard movement off in the distance. I didn't have very good visibility. It was dusk at the time, so I decided to investigate the noise, thinking it may be my squad. I made it probably a half mile when I came across a straight-up wooden staircase, leading up probably 20 or so steps. Now this staircase was slick, sanded and polished wood. It looked like something you would see in a home improvement magazine. The width of the staircase was no more than 5 feet, and there was a pencil-drawn symbol on the first step. Now, I don't remember all the details of this symbol, but I know it was a tall tree with a winged figure standing at the base of the tree, and a bunch of odd patterns drawn toward the top. I wasn't creeped out or weirded out by the sight. In fact, I felt especially peaceful, which I noticed at that moment. Well, I decided to walk up the stairs out of curiosity. I made it a little over halfway when, all of a sudden, it started raining. It suddenly became very cold and the sky got dark, which was odd because, well, the location I was in, it was particularly sunny and hot that day. As I continued up the stairs, I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't a scared uneasy, just, well, an abnormal feeling. Of course, I persevered and continued to the top. When I reached it, I sat down, facing towards the bottom of the stairs. And this is when things really get weird and, I guess, hard to believe if you weren't there. The trees that were green before I came up the stairs had all turned gray and withered like. I noticed a large rock that I had passed just before the stairs was also no longer there. Shortly after, a strange, harsh, smoky sort of smell came about. I remember nothing after that. I guess I ended up passing out and I woke up in the back of a Humvee on the way to the hospital due to heat exhaustion. I actually had no idea of this even happening until a day or two after the fact because, well, my memory was hazy. That's all for my story. Now, I've told a few friends, but no one tends to believe me. No one else there had seen the stairs when they found me, and it wasn't raining, and I wasn't even wet. I still have no explanation for this experience, and thanks for letting me share. Signed, Anonymous. Hey TB, I wanted to tell you about a supernatural experience that I had about 12 years ago. I live in Southern Oregon, and I was driving on Upper Applegate Road to my job at a small ranch. That's when I heard about a fatality accident. Quite terrible accident that had occurred on that road. Now, the road is very rural, and it's quite winding. So I was looking as I was driving to my job, and I was looking into the road to see if I could see where the crash occurred, because I wanted to be a better driver, a more careful driver. I came to a point where I came around a bend, and I saw these horrendous skid marks all over the road. And just as I was observing these skid marks, I see this dog-like creature from my side of the road. It run across the road in front of me, right over these skid marks, and into this embankment that was on a 90-degree angle. This dog-like creature started to run right up this embankment, when it simply disappeared. After that, I was driving slowly because it was a difficult corner, and I was in absolute shock because, well, I'm fairly familiar with all wildlife in the area. And this was the type of creature that I'd never seen before or since. And the way it just vanished. It almost vanished into the embankment. To this day, I have no explanation for what it could have been. It kind of looks like the pictures of a chupacabra on the internet. Because it wasn't large. I mean, it was larger than a dog, and it was kind of hairy and shaggy and hunched over looking. But this thing was fast. It was almost supernatural fast. And the way it climbed up the side of the embankment was very unnatural. I really don't know what to make of it, but I thought it was very eerie to me that I saw this creature right at the same spot where there had been this awful accident. I finally arrived at the ranch, and I was very shaken because, well, I still couldn't wrap my head around what I'd seen. But that's my story, and that's what I saw. I have no idea what the creature was. It was really ugly looking, very shaggy and dirty. I don't know how it completely disappeared into the embankment. It just did. It startled me because I was on high alert after all. I was looking for a place where these people had skidded out and died. And I had my mind on that. And I wasn't expecting to see this thing run across the road. It was very unexpected, to say the least. And the creature was far enough ahead of me that I didn't have to slam on my brakes, but I could clearly see it. And that's when it ran up that crazy embankment at a 90-degree angle and just disappeared. Thanks for reading. Signed, Stan. And there it is. All the true reports of strange encounters and sightings that I have for you tonight. So what'd you think about these? As always, I'm anxious to read your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, but please, keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have an unexplained encounter that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description, and well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks so much for taking this weird ride with me tonight. I really appreciate you. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and well, I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.